This story is titled, I Bought a House for Myself, not for my sister who sided with my cheating ex. Now my parents are furious, but I got my ultimate revenge. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hey guys, I'm 34, male, and I never thought I'd be posting on Reddit about this crap. But here we are. I used to have what I thought was a pretty decent life. Decent job as a mechanic at a local garage, a rented house in an okay neighborhood, and a wife, I'll call her Jessica, that I'd been with since college. Nothing fancy, but it was stable, you know? I worked hard, paid the bills on time, and thought I was building something that would last. Jessica and I weren't perfect, but whose relationship is? We had our routines, our inside jokes, our plans for the future. Or at least I thought we did. 2 years ago, my life basically exploded when I walked in on my wife Jessica screwing our neighbor in our bed. Not even making this up. I came home early from work because I wanted to surprise her for our anniversary. Guess the surprise was on me. I still remember the look on her face when she saw me standing in the doorway. Not even embarrassment, just annoyance that I'd interrupted. That's when I knew our 6-year marriage was actually dead long before I opened that bedroom door. The next few weeks were a blur of arguments, fake apologies, and me sleeping on my buddy Mike's couch while trying not to completely lose my mind. Jessica kept saying it was just a mistake and how we could work through this, but then I found texts going back months. This wasn't a one-time thing. She'd been cheating pretty much our entire marriage. The divorce was nasty as hell. She tried to take everything, including the car I'd bought before we even met. Her lawyer was this shark in a suit who kept looking at me like I was dirt. Meanwhile, I could barely afford my lawyer, who honestly seemed more interested in his lunch break than my case. But the worst betrayal wasn't even from Jessica. It was from my sister Amber, 29 female. We'd always been close, or so I thought. Single mom, 2 kids. I'd always helped her out when times were tough. Bought school supplies for my niece and nephew, fixed her car countless times, even paid her rent twice when she was between jobs. And how did she repay me? By completely siding with Jessica. Not because she thought I deserved to be cheated on, but because Jessica was buying her stuff. New clothes, taking her out to fancy restaurants, even babysitting so Amber could go on dates. And the cherry on top? Jessica promised to hook her up with this supposed rich friend of the guy she was cheating with. Amber was literally trading her loyalty for the chance at a sugar daddy. You probably drove her to cheat anyway, Amber told me over the phone when I called her, hurt that she was still hanging out with Jessica. Men never understand what women need. That was the moment I realized I was truly on my own. I hung up, blocked her number, and made a decision right then. I was going to rebuild my life if it killed me. So I packed up the few things Jessica's lawyer let me keep and found the cheapest apartment I could. It was basically a shoebox with a bathroom attached. The kind of place where you can cook dinner, watch TV, and use the toilet without getting up from your bed. Yeah, that's small. I remember sitting on that lumpy mattress the first night, wondering how the hell my life had collapsed so fast. Like 6 months before, I was married, had a decent place to live, thought my sister had my back, and was actually pretty happy. Now, I was in a crappy apartment that smelled like the previous tenant's cats. My wife was screwing half the neighborhood, and my sister was Team Jessica all the way. The worst part was seeing their Instagram posts. Jessica and Amber were suddenly BFFs, posting selfies at restaurants I could never afford to take Jessica to, with these long captions about living your best life and toxic people. Meaning me, obviously. One time they even posted from a weekend trip to the beach that Jessica and I had always talked about taking, but never had the money for. Guess she found the money once I wasn't in the picture. My parents weren't much help either. They kept telling me to try to work things out with Jessica, because marriage is about compromise. When I told them about catching her literally in bed with another dude, my mom said, "Well, relationships are complicated, honey." Yeah, no kidding, Mom. I think that's what hurt the most. Everyone acting like I was overreacting by being upset that my wife was cheating. Like I was the unreasonable one for not wanting to stay with someone who had been lying to my face for years. The breaking point came when I ran into Amber at the grocery store, about a month after moving into my shoebox apartment. I was buying ramen and cheap coffee, basically my entire diet at that point, and she was loading up on expensive snacks, the kind of stuff she could never afford before. I tried to avoid her, but she spotted me and came over with this fake concerned look. "Oh my God, you look terrible," she said, eyeing my cart. "Are you eating enough?" Before I could answer, she launched into this story about how Jessica was doing so much better now, and how her new boyfriend, the neighbor she'd been cheating with, was so generous and took them all out to this fancy restaurant last weekend. You know, she said, leaning in like she was sharing some big secret, Jessica told me everything about why your marriage failed. You really should have paid more attention to her needs. I just stared at her, not even knowing how to respond to that. My sister, who I'd helped raise after our dad left when she was 12, was standing in front of me basically saying I deserved to be cheated on. Jessica's new boyfriend might have a friend you'd like, she added with a smirk. Someone who can afford better groceries than this. She gestured at my cart. I left my groceries right there in the aisle and walked out. Didn't say a word to her. Just turned around and left. That night, I made a plan. I was done feeling sorry for myself. Done letting Jessica and Amber make me feel like I was the problem. I was going to rebuild my life from scratch, and I was going to do it so well that they'd choke on their words. My goal was to work my ass off until I could afford a place of my own. A real place, not a depressing shoebox. Something that was mine that no one could take away from me revenge would taste in the end. So my routine went insane and probably not healthy, but I didn't care. I'd wake up at 5 a.m., hit the crappy gym in my apartment building, basically just a treadmill and some dumbbells in a closet, then get to the garage by 6:30. I'd work until 6 or 7 p.m., sometimes later if we had emergency repairs. Then I'd grab some cheap takeout, go home, and study until my eyes couldn't stay open anymore. Weekends weren't any better. I picked up side jobs fixing cars for cash, changed oil, replaced brake pads, swapped out alternators, basic stuff I could do in parking lots with minimal tools. It wasn't exactly legal, but it paid, and I needed every dollar. The manager, I'll call him Rick, started giving me more responsibilities at the shop. First, it was just ordering parts and talking to customers. Then he let me handle the scheduling and some of the hiring. By month 6, I was basically running the place while he supervised, aka played solitaire in the back office. You know, he told me one day while we were locking up, I've owned this place for almost 30 years. Never had someone work as hard as you do. What's driving you, kid? I thought about telling him the whole sad story. The cheating wife, the backstabbing sister, the whole mess. But instead I just said, trying to buy a house. He nodded like that made perfect sense. Good goal. Nothing better than having your own place. No landlord to answer to. No worrying about rent going up. Smart move. That simple validation meant more to me than he probably realized. In a world where everyone seemed to think I was the bad guy for being upset about being cheated on, having someone just say good job was huge. The funny thing is, even though I was working nonstop, I started feeling better. Like the constant activity kept me from sitting around feeling sorry for myself, and seeing actual progress in my bank account every month gave me something to focus on, besides how much my life sucked. Don't get me wrong, I still had plenty of bad days. Days when I'd see a post from Jessica or Amber and have to resist the urge to throw my phone against the wall. Days when a customer would come in who reminded me of Jessica, and I get flashbacks of her cheating. But those days got fewer and farther between as time passed. The online classes were kicking my ass, though. I hadn't been a great student in high school, and trying to learn accounting principles after a 12-hour shift fixing cars was brutal. I failed the first practice exam so bad that my online tutor actually called me to ask if I was okay. But I kept at it, studying during lunch breaks, watching tutorial videos while waiting for parts deliveries, drilling myself with flashcards before bed. Slowly, painfully, I started to get it. And the more I understood, the more I could see how Rick's business could be improved. He was still doing everything old school, paper invoices, no real inventory system, pricing based on gut feeling rather than actual costs. One night, after closing, I showed him a spreadsheet I'd made analyzing the last 6 months of jobs. I'd broken down which services made the most profit, which customers were repeat business, which suppliers gave us the best deals. It was basic stuff I'd learned in my classes, but Rick looked at me like I'd just performed magic. "Where did you learn to do all this?" he asked, scrolling through my analysis. "Online classes," I said. "Been taking them at night." He gave me this long look, then said something that changed everything. "You know, I've been thinking about selling this place when I retire. Always figured I'd just close up shop, but you interested in buying me out someday?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Own the garage? Actually be my own boss? It seemed impossible. "I don't have that kind of money, Rick." He waved his hand dismissively. "We could work something out. Payment plan, you taking over more and more while I phase out. I'd rather sell to someone who gives a damn than some corporation that'll fire everyone and jack up prices." It was the first time in ages that I felt like maybe things might work out. Not just getting by, but actually building something, having a future that I controlled. That night, I went home and added another goal to my list. Not just buy a house, but buy the garage too. It would take longer, require even more work, but the thought of owning my own business, being completely independent, was too good to pass up. About a year into my non-stop grind, things at the shop were going great. Rick had basically made me the manager, and our business was up 30% since I'd started running things. I was saving every penny that didn't go to rent or food. My social life was non-existent, but I didn't care. I had a plan. Then I started hearing whispers that things weren't so perfect in Jessica and Amberland. The guy Jessica had been cheating with? Yeah, he'd moved on to someone else barely 2 months after our divorce was final. Apparently, he wasn't interested in anything serious. And that rich sugar daddy Jessica had promised to introduce Amber to? Turned out he was just some broke dude pretending to be rich to get into clubs. When Amber finally met him, he tried to get her to pay for dinner. The shopping trips slowed down. The fancy vacations stopped. Jessica had blown through most of her divorce money, trying to impress her new boyfriend, who'd now ditched her. And Amber, who'd quit her steady job at the insurance office thinking she was about to land a rich guy, was struggling to find work again. I heard all this through Mike, who was still friends with Jessica's cousin. I didn't say anything when he told me. Didn't laugh or say, "I told you so." Just nodded and kept working on the transmission I was fixing. But inside, I'm not gonna lie, it felt good to know karma was finally showing up. Rick noticed how much effort I was putting in and offered me a deal I never expected. He wanted to start the process of me buying him out of the business. "You're running it anyway," he said. "Might as well own it." We worked out a payment plan that would take years, but it was doable. Between that and my savings, I finally had enough for a down payment on a modest house in a decent neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it would be mine. The day I signed the papers for the house, I immediately got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was Amber. Somehow she'd gotten a new phone and wanted to reconnect. Said she missed her brother and how family should stick together. I didn't respond. I was too busy planning my move. Then one Saturday, I was at the shop late finishing up a complicated engine rebuild when Rick came in. He usually didn't work weekends, so I was surprised to see him. "Don't you ever take a day off?" he asked, shaking his head. I shrugged. Got nowhere else to be. He sat down on the stool next to my workbench. "Look, I've been meaning to talk to you about something. My wife and I are thinking about moving to Arizona. Her arthritis is getting worse, and the cold winters here aren't helping. Doctor says a warmer climate would be good for her." My heart sank. Was he selling the garage to someone else? After all my hard work? "So, what happens to the shop?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He looked at me like I was an idiot. "That's what I want to talk about. I'm ready to accelerate our plan. Instead of the 5-year buyout we discussed, I want to do it in 2. You take over as owner at the end of the year, we work out a payment schedule you can handle, and I head west for some sunshine." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was happening way faster than I'd expected. "I don't know if I have enough saved for that kind of down payment yet," I admitted. "I just put most of my savings toward the house." Rick waved his hand. "We'll figure it out. You've already increased business by 30%. The place is worth more with you running it anyway. Maybe we adjust the percentages a bit. You get a bigger cut of the profits now, but more of that goes toward your ownership stake." We spent the next hour working out the details. By the time he left, we had the outline of a deal that would make me the owner of Rick's Auto Repair by Christmas. It wasn't perfect. I'd be stretching myself financially for a couple of years. But it was doable. And the thought of owning my own business before I turned 35? That was worth the risk. As I was locking up the shop, my phone buzzed with another text from Amber. This one was less friendly than the first. "Seriously? You're just going to ignore me? After everything I've done for you? Real mature, bro." I snorted. Everything she'd done for me? Like trash-talking me to my ex-wife? Like mocking my pain while I was at my lowest point? Like choosing Jessica's empty promises over her own brother? I typed out about 5 different angry responses, deleted them all, and finally settled on, "Busy with work. Talk later." It was non-committal enough that she couldn't accuse me of ignoring her, but vague enough that later could mean basically never. I had no interest in letting Amber back into my life just because her meal ticket had disappeared. When I got home to my crappy apartment that night, I looked around at the packed boxes and cheap furniture and felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time: pride. In just a few days, I'd be moving into my own house. In a few months, I'd own my own business, and I'd done it all by myself, while the people who were supposed to love me had been betting on my failure. And because nothing in this life is perfect, the next morning, I got a call from the real estate agent. The seller was trying to back out, claiming they got a better offer. My stomach dropped, but the agent reassured me the contract was airtight. It'd just delay closing by a couple of weeks while their lawyer set them straight. Annoying, but after the year I'd had, one more obstacle wasn't going to stop me. 3 days before I was set to move into my new place, there was a knock at my apartment door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and the few friends I had left knew I was busy packing. I opened the door to find Amber standing there, looking nothing like the confident woman who'd mocked me at the garage a year ago. Her hair was a mess, her clothes were wrinkled, and she had this desperate look on her face that I recognized. It was the same look she used to have before asking me for money. "Hey, stranger," she said, trying to sound casual. "Can I come in?" I didn't move from the doorway. "What do you want, Amber?" She forced a laugh. "Can't a sister just visit her brother? It's been forever." "Yeah, about a year. Since you came to the shop to brag about Jessica's diamond bracelet," I said, crossing my arms. Her fake smile dropped. "Look, I made some mistakes, okay? I was stupid. Jessica fed me all these lies about you, and I believed her. I'm sorry." I laughed. "Where is Jessica now? Still buying you stuff?" Amber's eyes dropped to the floor. "We're not really hanging out anymore. She's going through some stuff. That means Jessica wasn't useful to her anymore." I sighed. Again. "What do you want, Amber?" That's when she noticed the boxes behind me. "Are you moving?" "Yep. Bought a house. Closing was last week." Her eyes lit up like I just offered her a winning lottery ticket. "A house? That's amazing. How many bedrooms?" And there it was. I could see the wheels turning in her head. "3," I said, knowing exactly where this was going. "That's perfect," she exclaimed, way too enthusiastically. "Because, well, I'm kind of in a situation. My landlord's selling the building, and we have to be out by the end of the month. The kids and I have been looking, but you know how crazy rent is these days." I just stared at her, waiting for her to get to the point. "So I was thinking," she continued, "maybe we could help each other out. The kids and I could move in with you. We wouldn't be any trouble. I could help with bills once I find a new job, and the kids would love having their uncle around." The audacity was actually impressive. After everything, the betrayal, the mockery, the complete dismissal of my pain, she really thought she could just show up and get a free place to live. "No," I said simply. Her smile faltered. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no, you can't live with me. Not now, not ever." She switched tactics immediately, her eyes welling up with tears. "But the kids, they have nowhere to go. We might end up in a shelter. Is that what you want? Your own niece and nephew homeless because you're too selfish to help?" That's when I lost it. Not by yelling or slamming the door, but by laughing. I couldn't help it. The sheer manipulation was so transparent. "Where were you when Jessica was screwing around behind my back?" I asked. "Where were you when I was sleeping on Mike's couch? When I lost my house, my savings, my marriage? Oh, right. You were shopping with the woman who destroyed my life, laughing about what a loser I was." Her face went pale. "That's not... I didn't mean..." I started to close the door, but she stuck her foot in the way. "Please," she begged, real desperation in her voice now. "I have nowhere else to go. Mom and Dad won't help. Jessica's ghosting me and my friends. They can't take us in." "That sounds like a you problem," I said, echoing the exact words she'd said to me when I told her Jessica had taken most of our joint account before I could freeze it. I moved her foot and closed the door. For about 5 minutes, she stood out there knocking and calling my name. I ignored her completely, going back to packing boxes like she wasn't even there. Eventually, she gave up and left. I thought that would be the end of it. I should have known better. The next day, my phone started blowing up with texts and calls, not just from Amber, but from my parents too. Apparently, Amber had gone straight to them with some sob story about how I was refusing to help her and the kids in their time of need. My mom's voicemail was classic guilt trip material. "I raised you better than this. Family helps family. I can't believe you would let your sister and those poor children suffer when you have a whole house to yourself. Never mind that my parents had barely reached out during my divorce. Never mind that they'd suggested I try to work things out with Jessica, even after I told them about the cheating. Never mind that they'd done absolutely nothing to help me when I was the one in crisis." My dad's message was worse. "Son, I'm disappointed in you. A man takes care of his family. Your sister needs help, and you're in a position to provide it. That's your responsibility as her brother." I hadn't heard from my dad in months, and this was what finally got him to call, telling me I wasn't being man enough because I wouldn't let my backstabbing sister move into the house I'd worked my ass off to buy. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I focused on finishing my packing and coordinating with the moving company. I had taken the day off from the garage specifically to get everything ready for the move, and I wasn't going to waste it dealing with family drama. Then came the text that really set me off. It was from Jessica. Yeah, my ex-wife, the woman who'd cheated on me for most of our marriage, thought she had the right to weigh in. I know we're not on the best terms, but I'm really worried about Amber and the kids. She says you bought a house with plenty of room but won't help them. That doesn't sound like the man I married. Please reconsider. The hypocrisy was so stunning I had to read it twice. I finally broke my silence with a single reply. The man you married no longer exists. You killed him. Do not contact me again. Then I blocked her number. By that evening, the messages from my family had taken on a more threatening tone. My mom was now saying she was going to have to get involved if I didn't do the right thing. My dad mentioned something about coming over to talk some sense into me. Amber had switched from begging to angry accusations about how I was showing my true colors and always was the selfish one. I didn't care anymore. Let them come. Let them threaten. I was done being the family doormat. The next morning, I woke up to a new voice message from an unknown number. It was Jessica's mother, my former mother-in-law, telling me she was very disappointed in how I was treating Amber and that she had raised Jessica to believe family comes first. I nearly choked on my coffee. Yeah, Jessica really put family first when she was screwing the neighbor. I realized they were pulling out all the stops, contacting anyone they thought might have influence over me. It was pathetic and desperate, but also a little scary. How far were they willing to go? I decided to take some precautions. I called the real estate agent and asked if we could move up the closing date. Explained that I had some family issues and needed to get into the house as soon as possible. She said she'd try, but no promises. Then I called Rick and explained the situation. He was surprisingly understanding, even offering to let me crash at his place if things got too intense with my family. I also called Mike, who had been my rock through the divorce. He immediately offered to come over and help me finish packing, and to be there when I moved in case my family tried to show up and cause trouble. Dude, he said, they're only coming around now because you're doing well. Where were they when you were sleeping on my couch? Screw 'em. It felt good to have people in my corner, even if they weren't blood relatives. That afternoon, the real estate agent called with good news. We could close the next day. The seller had finally accepted that they couldn't back out, and all the paperwork was ready. I'd be able to move into my new house 48 hours earlier than planned. I didn't tell anyone in my family about the change in plans. Let them show up at my empty apartment. By then, I'd be safely in my new home, with a security system installed and no forwarding address left behind. Moving day came, and I left my crappy apartment behind for good. My new house wasn't anything special by most people's standards, but to me, it was everything. I spent that first night sitting on my back porch with a cold soda, looking up at the stars, feeling like I could finally breathe again. And I did something I probably shouldn't have. I posted a few photos of my new place on Facebook. Nothing flashy, just a simple new chapter, new home post. I knew Amber would see it. I knew my parents would see it. Part of me wanted them to. The reactions were immediate. Friends I hadn't talked to in ages congratulated me. Guys from the shop liked the post. A few people from high school commented about how well I was doing. And then the private messages started. My dad telling me how disappointed he was that I would flaunt my success while your sister struggles. My mom saying I was being needlessly cruel. And Amber? She went nuclear. She posted this long, dramatic rant on her page about how money changes people. She didn't tag me, but everyone knew who she was talking about. I didn't engage with their drama. I focused on the garage. Business was booming. And Rick was talking about retiring earlier than planned. We were working out the details of me taking over completely within the next year. For the first time since finding Jessica with that guy, I was actually happy. Not just surviving, but thriving. And I'd done it all on my own. But of course, they couldn't just let me be. 3 days after I moved in, my mom called from a new number I hadn't blocked yet. I picked up without checking caller ID, thinking it might be a client from the garage. Hello? Finally, you answer. My mom's voice was that special mix of relief and accusation. We've been trying to reach you for days. I sighed. What do you want, Mom? What do I want? I want you to act like the son I raised. Your sister and those children are about to be homeless, and you're ignoring their calls while living in a big empty house all by yourself. I had to laugh at that. Big empty house? Mom, it's a modest 3-bedroom in a middle-class neighborhood, and it's not empty. I live here. You know what I mean, she snapped. You have room, they need room. It's that simple. Nothing's ever that simple, I said. Where was all this family concern when Jessica was cheating on me? When I was the one who lost everything? There was a pause on the line. Then, in a softer voice, she said, that was different. How? How was it different? I demanded. You're a man, she said. Like that explained everything. Men can take care of themselves. Amber has children. And there it was. The double standard that had defined my entire relationship with my family. I was expected to handle everything on my own, to sacrifice, to be the strong one. But Amber, she got endless excuses. Mom, I said, keeping my voice calm, I worked 80-hour weeks for 2 years to afford this house. I took online classes after 12-hour shifts at the garage. I lived in an apartment where the bathroom ceiling leaked when the upstairs neighbor took a shower. I did all that by myself, without help from anyone, especially not my family. So no, Amber can't live with me. She made her choice when she sided with Jessica, and now she can deal with the consequences. She made a mistake, my mom insisted. People make mistakes. Yeah, they do, I agreed. And sometimes those mistakes have consequences that can't be fixed with a simple sorry. This is one of those times. So you'll punish the children too? They didn't do anything wrong. It was a low blow, using my niece and nephew against me. I loved those kids, even though I hadn't seen them much since the divorce. But I knew what would happen if I let Amber move in. She'd never leave. And eventually, I'd end up supporting all three of them while she went back to her old ways. The kids have grandparents with a 4-bedroom house, I pointed out. Why aren't they moving in with you and Dad? Another telling pause. Your father and I are too old to have children running around. We need our peace and quiet. They wanted to use my house as a dumping ground for Amber's problems, so they wouldn't have to deal with them. Well, I need my peace and quiet too, I said. After the past 2 years, I've earned it. This isn't over, my mom warned before hanging up. She was right about that, at least. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next day, I came home from work to find Amber's car parked in my driveway. She was sitting on my front porch with her kids, surrounded by suitcases and garbage bags full of clothes. What the hell is this? I asked as I got out of my truck. We got evicted, she said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. We have nowhere else to go. The kids looked confused and tired. I felt bad for them, but this level of manipulation made my blood boil.
She said defiantly.
So you thought you'd just
said
show up
no,
at my house with
but
all
I
your
know
stuff
you didn't really
without
mean it.
even asking
You
if it
wouldn't
was
let your
okay?
own niece and nephew be homeless. She was trying to back me into a corner, using the kids as shields. It was a dirty move, but exactly what I'd expect from her. Get in your car and leave, I said firmly. Now. Or what? She challenged. You'll call the cops on your own sister? With her kids right here? I took a deep breath. Amber, this isn't going to work. I'm not letting you guilt me into this. Take the kids to Mom and Dad's. They won't take us, she admitted. They said they're too old for kids. Then call Jessica, I suggested. You two were best friends, remember? Shopping buddies. She can put you up. Amber's face darkened. Jessica is... We're not really talking anymore. Shocking, I muttered. Look, I feel for the kids, I really do. But you can't stay here. You're a real piece of work, Amber spat. Acting all high and mighty because you've got a house now. Newsflash, you're still the same loser Jessica cheated on. No wonder she couldn't stay faithful. Who would want to be with someone so selfish and cold? And just like that, any guilt I might have felt vanished. That was the real Amber. The one who had mocked my pain, who had chosen Jessica over her own brother, who was now trying to manipulate me using her children. Get off my property, I said coldly. Now, or I really will call the cops. She must have seen something in my face that told her I meant it, because she started gathering up her bags. Come on, kids, she said loudly. Your uncle doesn't want us. We'll figure something out on our own, like we always do. A week after Amber's little stunt on my porch, I thought things would finally settle down. I had my house, my business, my peace, but people like her and Jessica, they don't go down without one last desperate attempt. I knew better, so I took my caution. So, the morning after Amber's stunt on my porch, I went straight to the county clerk's office and filed for a no trespassing order against her. The process was easier than I expected. Turns out when someone shows up with bags and kids trying to force their way into your home, that's actual grounds for concern. The police officer I spoke to said I had enough evidence to enforce it immediately. She also suggested installing cameras in case Amber tried anything again. So that's exactly what I did. By noon, I had security cameras covering every inch of my property, with motion alerts sent straight to my phone. Let Amber try another sob story ambush. I'd have the cops at my doorstep before she could get comfortable. But then Jessica showed up out of nowhere. It was late, close to midnight, and I was just getting home from the garage. My porch light caught the figure sitting on my front steps, arms wrapped around herself. It took me a second, but when she looked up, I recognized her. Jessica. She looked terrible. Nothing like the put-together woman who used to flaunt new jewelry on Instagram while mocking me behind my back. Her hair was a mess. She had bags under her eyes, and she looked smaller somehow, like life had finally knocked her down a few pegs.
Matt, she said, her voice weak. I didn't know where else to go. I laughed at the sheer audacity. Not my problem, I said, stepping around her to unlock my door. Please, she said, standing quickly. Just talk to me. I sighed. Talk about what, Jessica? How you cheated on me for years? How you ran through the divorce money and got dumped? Or maybe how you encouraged my sister to turn against me? Pick one. She flinched, but I didn't feel bad. Not even a little. I made mistakes, she whispered, swallowing hard. I was stupid. I thought. She stopped, rubbing her arms like she was trying to hold herself together. I thought I had everything figured out, but I didn't. He left me, Matt, just like that. One day I woke up and he was gone. Took everything. I lost my job, my apartment. I'm back at my mom's place, and she's threatening to kick me out. Sounds like karma, I said, stepping inside. She grabbed my arm before I could close the door. I loved you, she blurted, tears in her eyes. I know I messed up, but we had something real. Don't you ever miss it? I stared at her for a long moment, then smiled. No, I said, and shut the door in her face. I stood there listening as she cried outside for a minute before finally giving up and leaving. I didn't feel a damn thing. She was just another person from my past, desperate to claw her way back in. But that door was locked, and I was never opening it again. Amber must have found out about Jessica's failed attempt, because 2 days later, my parents showed up unannounced. I opened the door to see my mom with her arms crossed, my dad already looking pissed. We need to talk, my mom said, stepping past me into the house like she still had authority over me. I let them in, if only to get it over with. They didn't waste time. Your sister is in trouble, my dad started. She needs a place to stay. A good son would help her. A good son? I repeated, laughing. Funny. I don't remember hearing from you when I was the one who needed help. My mom's face hardened. That was different. You're a man. Amber has children. And I told her to take them to you, I shot back. But I guess your peace and quiet is more important, huh? You want me to be the responsible one, but only when it benefits you. My dad stood up, voice cold. You're selfish. You let money change you. You're not the son we raised. That hit, but not in the way they intended. I just nodded. You're right. I'm not the son you raised. That guy would have let himself be guilted into taking care of a woman who betrayed him. That guy would have kept giving to people who never gave back. That guy would have let his family walk all over him. I looked them both in the eye. But that guy's gone, and you should probably leave. My mom huffed, grabbing her purse. You'll regret this. Doubt it, I said, holding the door open. They left without another word. I closed the door behind them, locked it, and stood there for a second, taking it all in. I wasn't their son anymore. Good. I didn't need to be. I had a house, a business, a future. I built it all from scratch. And as I stood in my own home with nobody left to drag me down, I realized something. I'd never been freer in my entire life.